Welcome everybody. My apologies for this morning. I was involved in a bit of a vehicular incident. I'm safe, but the car didn't fare quite so well, unfortunately. So anyway, I'm recording a copy of the tutorial material, which I'll make available for you to review. I just didn't want any students to be disadvantaged or to miss out on the tutorial content. And while you do have access to the slides, I often add a lot of extra material to the slides because I either know it will be helpful in the assignment, or in the case of the review questions, we'll be covering extra content. So I just wanted to make available a copy of the tutorial content just so that you're not disadvantaged. Okay, so on with the show. So just a reminder of who I am. I'm Dr. David Reilly. If you missed me in the first week, hopefully you'll now be familiar with at least the sound of my voice. And you can see a lovely picture of me there in the bottom right hand corner, the orange beard. Just a reminder, if you've got any email questions, my email address is d.reilly, R-E-I-L-L-Y, @griffith.edu.au. Okay. So this week we'll be covering the assignment and in particular how to write a discussion section. Just a reminder of the two topics that we're looking at in our essays. You can either investigate self-determination theory and its relation to quitting smoking. So why do some people be more motivated than others to quit smoking? So does it predict individual differences in intention to quit? And the other topic, of course, was parenting styles, Maccabee and Martin's 4 parenting styles, and whether they predict anxiety in young people. Now, it may be the case that certain parenting styles, like a secure, authoritative parenting style, really doesn't predict anxiety. But an authoritarian might well. It might set people up for a greater incidence of anxiety. Okay, so they're the topics, and you need to do a bit of a literature review and then work your way through each of the topic areas. And you've got to form a position statement whether they do or do not predict the outcome of interest. Just remember with topic 2, it's about parenting styles and anxiety in young people. So we're not talking older adults, we're talking adolescents and young adults, college age. Just a refresher from last week where we talked about the importance of paragraphing. We want to try to have a nice organized structure to each paragraph. If you have a paragraph that's going more than 200 words, or if it's going more than, half a page, 3/4 of a page, it's probably time to divide it into sub-paragraphs. So you want to start off with your topic sentence, which should be indented so that I can see that this is a new paragraph. You give a little bit of detail about the topic, provide evidence from the literature, so that would be citations, particular studies. You might, if you've got a counter-argument or alternative view, it's entirely up to you whether you want to make that one or not. Some people just present a very one-sided view of the literature, but it might also be the case that there just aren't any counter-arguments and the evidence that you're presenting is just so compelling that you wouldn't need a counter-argument in it. And then the final one, sentence 6, that should be showing what's important and then linking between that paragraph and the next paragraph. You really do want to have transitions if you can in order to connect these paragraphs together. So you can see here with our paragraphing structure here, and this is taken from the article last week on mindful chocolate consumption. We've got a topic sentence here, then we've presented some research in the second sentence there. We've gone into greater detail now with the Marchori and Papier's article, and we're actually telling you what was found, why it was important, and we've got that alternative view there that self-reported hunger was not related to calories consumed in a mindfulness condition, but it was in the non-mindfulness condition. Okay, and then we've got a few more bits of research that are presented. So Christella and Wolver, Timmerman, and then we've got our final argument here summarising what we've found. Such techniques may enhance the positive mood that people receive from eating candy like chocolate, and we therefore examine this idea in the current study. Now, when you do your actual essay, you're going to have a nice, clear structure. So we start out with our title page. In APA, we always put the page number in the top right, and you can see that there in red. You wouldn't have the red box around it. This is just to draw your attention to it. We have the title of the paper, the name of the institution, the course code. It's really helpful too if you put the tutor's name. So I know this is one of my students to be marking. Not everybody knows who their tutor is, and that's okay, but it just makes it a little bit easier. So if someone else has put my name because it's switched classes, well then that tutor knows to hand the essay over to me. You don't need to have a running head, but note that other courses may require it. One thing that we do need is the assignment word count. Now this should be accurate, but it should not include the title page and it should not include the reference list. So don't overestimate your word count and kind of sort of shoot yourself in the foot. We don't want to do that. So we want to kind of have a roughly accurate word count. And remember, 1498 is much more believable than exactly 1,500 words. You write 1,500 words, I'll be paying more attention to it. Okay? So go for the more believable. If you were to embellish your word count, go for the more believable option. Okay, so we're going to give you an example essay question. Discuss the relationship between binge eating and social anxiety. So binge eating is a coping mechanism where we eat not so good food, we eat a lot of it, we might keep going till we've eaten the whole tub of ice cream or the whole packet of cookies, and it's theorised that there's a relationship between binge eating disorder and social anxiety. So a bit of comorbidity there. So if we were starting our paragraph, we'd want to broadly introduce the topic of the essay, which is eating disorders and psychology. So we set the context, talk about how prevalent it is, why it's important to understand it, and we'd kind of focus specifically on what the essay topic was or what the essay theme is. We want to argue the aims of the essay so that there's a positive relationship between binge eating and social anxiety, and that binge eating likely predisposes someone to, that social anxiety predisposes someone to a binge eating disorder. Then in paragraph 2, we define the first topic. So we talk about social anxiety. What is it? Then we might move in the second paragraph to talking about binge eating. So you need to describe what the topic is. So we might talk about, for example, the state of anxiety, that fear response when we're interacting with other people. It's particularly stressful if it's social anxiety, like in a big group. Whereas one-on-one people are generally a little bit more comfortable. Then we talk about why this topic is important. So I might have some literature here to explain what social anxiety is, what its prevalence rate is, and how it negatively impacts people. Okay? I might provide evidence of past research which has actually explored this topic, and I would reference appropriately. So we've got here an example. Social anxiety disorder, or SAD, is a fear of being embarrassed or humiliated in social or performance-based situations, to the point where there's a significant functional impairment or distress. And if I'm going to cite anyone, the American Psychiatric Association, that's a pretty good one. I might want to read more broadly, though, and have some additional references on that. It says previously the DSM-4 did not allow for a diagnosis of SAD in the presence of medical conditions. This condition was modified in the DSM, so it's reflecting the more recent information, the changes. So that's another reason why you would want to try to get literature that's a little more recent if you can. Particularly if the fear was related to the medical accession. So, for example, if obesity was a problem, well, I have a fear of going out dancing and making a fool of myself because I'm a little bit heavy. That might be one of the underlying factors predisposing me towards a social anxiety disorder. Okay, so in paragraph 2, I'm going to go into a lot more detail now, and I'm going to talk about binge eating. So I talk about the criteria for actually diagnosing it, how it differs from, the type of binge that a regular person might do once in a while, and I also talk about prevalence rates here. Okay. So prevalence is particularly important, and what subgroups it's likely to be related to. So it's diagnosed in adolescence generally. There is occasionally where will emerge in adulthood, but generally it's found in overweight and obese adolescents. They're more likely to engage in binge eating disorder. Okay, there's lots of reasons why. Not all psychological, it's more sort of neurological. There's a strong connection between the neurology of hunger and thirst and obesity related and weight related conditions. So it could be partly psychological, it could be partly a neurological condition. And we've also found that it leads to weight gain and obesity onset. And then we've given a criteria here that it occurs at least once a week for 3 months. So it's not just the one-off binge when you've had a bad day. It's a pattern of behaviour. Okay. Now in body paragraph 4, now I want to bring the two together. So linking social anxiety to binge eating. In your essay, it might be linking self-determination theory to smoking cessation or parenting style and anxiety disorder. Bring it all together. And that's where I'm going to start to present research that links the two topics together. And I'm going to have several paragraphs where I'm just presenting evidence. Okay, so you can see here in this paper, Striegel, Moore, et al. Now it's got 8 there. That's not APA referencing, so you would actually put a date there rather than the number 8. But you would start to introduce different literature. Okay. Now you'd rinse and repeat. You do several paragraphs. 1 paragraph at least, maybe 2, would be on the cross-cultural aspects and whether SDT or parenting styles generalize cross-culturally. Then we come to our conclusion. Now, it's going to be the last bit that I read, so we want to make it as compelling as possible. So you've got to summarise and finish with a strong concluding or summarising paragraphs. You need to summarise your main points without sounding repetitive. Easier said than done. You might also highlight any important limitations or gaps that warrant further investigation. So I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, if there's inconsistencies in the literature, that might be something that you want to talk about, or perhaps there's a moderator that you've identified. So gender moderates the association between parenting style and anxiety. Perhaps it's more prevalent in girls, or more prevalent in boys for that matter. So if there are any moderators, you might want to talk about that as well. Okay. So here's an example conclusion. Remember, this is not an essay conclusion. This is a article conclusion, which is slightly different. It says the study may have limited generalisabilities. Our online sample is predominantly white, female and highly educated. So conclusions about temporal sequence cannot be made from a cross-sectional survey. And then it talks about some of the other limitations. Whereas your conclusion is going to be about the link between SDT and smoking cessation, or the link between parenting style and anxiety in adolescence. So you'll just be summarising the points that you've made. You might start off with a sentence like, in conclusion, the above-mentioned research provides a strong evidence base for the association between certain parenting styles and anxiety, with authoritarian and neglectful parenting styles showing a much stronger relationship with anxiety than maybe authoritative and indulgent. Okay? So, you will adapt that to whatever your reading of the literature tells you, but you just want to summarise what the arguments are that you make. Now, in the structure for your essay, this is what we're suggesting. The paragraph 1 talks about why it's important to understand predictors of quitting smoking or anxiety. What is the theory that you're going to use to better understand these outcomes? And then finish the paragraph by stating the aims of the essay and introducing all the key topics that you're going to look at, including, and we've got to emphasise this, including cultural differences here. Okay, don't forget to put that in. Now, paragraph 2, just describe the outcome of interest, which is quitting smoking or anxiety, and include references to support the claims made about these outcomes, including prevalence rates, how difficult it is to quit smoking, how hard it is to treat anxiety, etc. Then paragraph 3, what we're suggesting is that that's where you describe the components of the theory. That is, the 3 components of SDT, or the 4 different parenting styles. Do not make more than one paragraph because you're going to run out of words, and we don't want 4 different paragraphs on each of the parenting styles. It's 1 or 2 sentences about each of the 3 elements of SDT or the 4 parenting styles. Paragraphs 4 and 5, you need to synthesize past literature. So you need to discuss about how the theory components of SDT are related to the outcome of interest, or how the parenting styles are related to the relationship. So what parenting styles were assessed in each study, and how well did they predict anxiety in young people, or which components have been found to be the best predictors. So is it relatedness? Is it autonomy, or is it competence? Now you also want to look at whether your findings are consistent across studies. If not, where were the differences? That's really, really important. Maybe they're using different types of measures, or maybe they're using different types of samples. Identify what is the difference and talk about how that might affect the conclusions reached. Paragraph 6, by the time you get to 6 or 7, then you really want to be introducing culture. Okay? You need to define culture. There is 1 mark in the marking criteria that we've got for giving a definition. It should be 1 sentence only. Just say what an individualistic and a collectivist culture is. If you've got a reference, that's even better. Then compare how the different theoretical components are related to the outcome of interest in different cultures. You need to provide evidence to support it, so that's where we cite more studies. Again, note if it's consistent across studies. If not, were the differences due to culture or maybe the types of samples? Is there enough evidence to say that there are cultural differences? If you've only got a few studies, then perhaps maybe you can't find any studies. Say that more work needs to be conducted cross-culturally. But you've got to be careful here, because if I can find more studies than you've gotten, that wouldn't be a strong argument to make. Okay? Now, paragraph 7, that's where you have your conclusion, either 7 or 8, because you might have to break some of these up into smaller paragraphs. But once you've addressed each of the questions in your essay question, end your essay with an effective and informative conclusion. Yes, SDT predicts individual motivation to quit smoking, but the components vary across cultures, for example. Summarise your main points without sounding repetitive, and if there are any limitations or gaps, mention these. Just make sure that it accurately summarises your main points and leaves a clear understanding here in the reader's mind of your arguments, so that I know whether you've answered the essay questions. Now, referencing is really, really important. It's something that students struggle with, particularly in first year. Now, at this stage of your academic career, we wouldn't trust any arguments that a first year student would make, because you haven't gone and collected data and, provided firm evidence. So you need to attribute any claims that you make to somebody else. I jokingly call it pinning the blame on a particular author. So I'm not saying this, but that author does, and they have a way more authority than I do as a student. So you're never going to get in trouble for acknowledging the source of the information. Okay? You need to provide information to the reader so they can access the original source. And if it's one I haven't read, I probably will at least take a sneaky look at the abstract. Okay, so your assignment must include in-text citations. It must include a reference list. So every reference that you cite in text, there should be a matching one there in the reference list. Don't leave any out. Now, when you mention the source of information as part of your writing, you also include the reference. So in-text citations take a number of forms. For example, the study found evidence of the link between X and Y, and I've got here senior and junior 2000s. Okay, you can also do a narrative citation here where senior and junior 2000 found evidence of the link between X and Y, or you might go back then and you might just pop it in there. Now, it's really a matter of personal style and preference as to where and how you put it, but make sure that you do put the references in. Generally, we'd want to see multiple references, so your first one might be senior and junior. You might cite them again, and I would probably put in a different reference for the third one, okay? And I'd be moving on to the next study. Note that the word "and" is used outside of parentheses or round brackets, whereas ampersand is used within parentheses. So if we have a look at here, we use the ampersand, whereas we use AND here. In text citations, when there's more than one author, the first time you do it, you cite them as senior and junior, and the second time onwards, also senior and junior. But when you have 3 or 4 authors, the first time you would use et al, and then the second time et al, and the third time et al. Okay? So if you've got 3 or more authors, you use et al. It's Latin. Now, we don't really need quotations in this assignment. Quotes really don't earn marks. So you really need to paraphrase and in your own words and then provide an appropriate citation. We don't want to have direct copying material from a source, so we use Turnitin, and it actually flags plagiarism incidences pretty easily, and students often inadvertently copy material and they forget to rewrite it in their own words. In my experience, most plagiarism is unintentional. So that's why we have a draft Turnitin submission portal. You can upload your assignment and it'll tell you any places that are too similar. Okay? Now, I don't want to get all strict, but plagiarism is pretty serious, so we want to try to avoid that if we can. We do that by submitting a draft submission, checking it, making sure we haven't inadvertently plagiarized, and then we change it and paraphrase it if we need to. Okay? So hopefully it won't apply to anyone here, but it is something to be mindful of. Now, the final Turnitin portal will be available in week 5. Do not submit a draft into the final because it might actually, you can't resubmit. So if you do actually submit a draft there, email Vaya immediately so she can delete it. You want to just submit it to the draft version. Similarly, if a draft or an incorrect assignment is submitted to the final portal, Vaya must be notified immediately so she can fix it up. Okay? Otherwise, we might mark the incorrect document, and that would not be a good thing for anyone concerned. Okay? Now, the reference list, that provides the full publication details, and it's only for the works you've cited in your essay. So if you've read something but you don't end up citing it, leaving it out. It does not include any books or articles you've read but not cited. The key elements are the author, the year of the publication, title of the work, title of the publication, so this will either be the journal or the book that was in, and any electronic publishing details. And by that, we mean the DOI. Okay. So exact requirements differ depending on the source of information, if it's a journal, a book, and a website. Inclusion of a DOI is really, really important. So make sure you do actually look up the DOI. It'll usually be given in the article, but if you go to the publisher's website, they almost always have the DOI. Even if it's for an article that was 20 years ago, they usually have a DOI available. Now, all references have hanging indentation. And what that means is you have your first line like this, and then the second and subsequent lines are indented. Okay? So here's some examples. So our first line isn't indented. We've got our author name, we've got our year, we've got the name of the article here, and we've got the journal, which is in italics. We've got the year, the volume number, and we've got the page number. And then down here, we've got the, we've got the DOI. Okay. Now here's an example of a chapter in an edited book, Tardful and Turner. It was published in the Social Psychology of Intergroup Relations, and we've got here the editor, the book, and we've got the page numbers of the book chapter, and then the publisher. Now, if you're going to use a website, and I really advise against it, use peer-reviewed literature, but if you were, this would be how you would do a website. But again, I would strongly advise against this. So don't use Wikipedia, don't use a blog article, use peer-reviewed sources, please. Now, page formatting, you want 2.54 centimetre margins on the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. You should have a page number in the upper right corner. Double spacing, this is really important, guys and gals, because if I want to leave a comment, I need space to write that comment. And if you've used 1.5 or even one line spacing, I've got nowhere to fit that comment, so I need double spacing. Very important. Okay, so we've got here an example. We've got a page number there. We've got our margins here. I'll just move that over here in blue there. Note that we've got indentation of all our paragraphs. Very, very important. Now, because it's hard to read when you're marking these online, please make it Times New Roman. Make it size 12. Don't make me have to zoom in because you've made it size 9 or 10 or something like that. Double line spacing throughout each paragraph. Left align paragraphs, but indent your paragraphs as well. Don't center them. Center is really hard to read, and I will be a very cranky marker if it's centered. Similarly, don't justify it. with a justified paragraph style, just use left align, please. Indent the first line of all new paragraphs. All you've got to do is just hit the tab key. It's really simple and it makes it so much easier to read. Okay, so you can see here we've indented our paragraphs. We've got double lines, spacing. So I could actually write a comment in here in between these two sentences because I've got room. It makes a big difference. Double line spacing, no space between paragraphs. We indent our paragraphs and they're left aligned. Okay. And 12-point Times New Roman font, please. Now, I know APA 7th allows Calibri and a few other weird and wacky fonts, but you want to make this an easy, pleasant task to mark your essay. So please, please, Times New Roman 12-point font. You might want to include headings. So obviously you have a heading for the title and for the reference list, but you might have subheadings as well. So like a heading level 2 here and heading level 2. Okay, so you now have all the information and materials ready to complete the essay. And the following documents are available in the essay folder under the unit map. So click on the unit map, scroll down to week 7, and then click on the essay folder. There's an assignment information document, includes the marking criteria. There's an example essay with notes. Refer to this for structure because it is not APA compliant. Desi and Ryan's SDT, there's a hyperlink to the original source. And if you want the Maccabee and Martin, just click, it says see textbook, it's not. Click on the readings tab. Okay. Readings. Excuse me, it's hard to write with a little mouse. And page 39, I think from memory, is where it starts and you read about the parenting styles. You can also read about Borman in the textbook. The tutorial slides are available to download from the unit map under tutorial content. So you can look up SDT, for example. And you can make a start on your essay right away, as soon as you've finished this, watching this recording. Now the essay is due in week 7 at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, December 21st. We'll talk more about the due date as we get close, but mark it in your calendar. Set yourself up a reminder so that you don't forget to hand it in. Okay, so now we're going to do a bit of a discussion. This is the fun part for me. What are the contributions of the behavioural approach to personality? Well, the behavioural approach covers learning and in particular classical and operant conditioning. So classical is about associations such as fears, whereas operant conditioning is rewards and punishments. It also introduced us to the social cognitive approach. So social cognitive theory is Bobo, and remember the Bobo dolls in the textbook where an adult beats the hell out of the Bobo doll and then the child imitates the behaviour. It's about modelling and it's about social learning. We learn and we model our behaviour on the actions of other people. Okay? So it also talked about reciprocal influences on the environment. The environment shapes us, but we shape our environment as well. It also, by introducing a cognitive element, sort of introduced the cognitive dimensions of personality, like differing expectancies. So if I have different expectations of what those rewards and punishments are, well, that will guide my behaviour. And also information processing styles. Okay, now the other thing we talked about was congruence and incongruence. So if you're congruent, that means your emotions and your self matches your behaviour. When we're congruent, we're fully functioning, we're achieving our highest level of potential. Where there's incongruence is when we feel one way and we act another. This causes distress and anxiety. It often leads people to become defensive, mean-spirited, and they sort of become self-centered and, trapped by convention. So we try to help our clients lead a more congruent life. So congruence is brought about by the combination of unconditional positive regard and also unconditional love. So you accept your client. Hopefully your client has friends and social relationships that are rewarding. They have family that are rewarding, and this leads to a more congruent state. Now, when it comes to number 3, Eisnick's big 3, this is Hans Eisnick, and he talked about 3 personality traits. Now, the first one was extroversion, whether one is socially outgoing and comfortable with that, whether they were more introverted. So you've heard of the term introverted extrovert. There's someone who's a bit in the middle. Then we also had neuroticism. So neuroticism is a tendency towards seeing things negatively. If you've seen Winnie the Pooh, you remember good old Eeyore? So he saw everything as bleak and sad. That's a little bit like neuroticism. Neuroticism covers depression. It also covers anxiety. And these are 3 traits that we all have to varying degrees. We're all slightly extroverted or slightly introverted. We all have elements of neuroticism, and that's normal. So if you're occasionally sad or you're occasionally anxiety, that's not a clinical diagnosis. That's just part of the normal human condition. Now, the other trait, his big 3, was called psychotism, and this is not normal. Okay? Psychotism is where you like hurting other people. You gain satisfaction from doing that. And you're generally a pretty dark character. You're a dark person. You don't like other people and you do like hurting them. So these people are rare. Psychopaths in particular, they're less than 1% of the population. But they like doing bad stuff and hurting people. So that's a very rare personality trait. Most people score very, 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 very low in psychotism. Okay, so I don't want you to take the impression away that that is a normal one. Now, in particular, people who score high in psychotism, there are 3 evil dimensions of personality we call the dark triad. Now, that is narcissism, so that's grandiosity, feeling of pride and egotism, and a complete lack of empathy. So it's all about me, I don't care about you. Then there's Machiavellianism. This is where people are manipulative, exploitative, deceptive. And if you want to think of someone who channels this in a socially productive way, think of a politician. My apologies if any of you have politicians in the family. But generally they don't have a good reputation. They don't always tell the truth. But they can still use that in an adaptive way to hopefully help society. And the final element, of course, is psychopathy, which is antisocialness, selfishness, very selfish, very remorseless, no empathy or remorse, and they're often impulsive as well. Now, the final one there, what's the difference between the interactionist approach and the culture pattern. Well, the culture pattern approach says that we form our personality in large degrees by the culture that we grow up in. So if we grow up in an individualistic culture, we're going to be more self-centered, more likely to be narcissistic. Whereas if we grow up in a more communal culture where we care about everybody and how our actions affect others, then we might be more agreeable, more pro-social, a little bit less selfish. So culture pattern suggests that we derive our personality in part by the culture we grow up in. Now, the interactionist approach says that our personality is based on our experiences and the social situations we find ourselves in, and also based on our personality and our temperament. And it's an interaction between the situation, now apologies I can't do text here, situation and temperament. So the aspects of personality that are biologically determined. Okay, so that's the material for today. If you've got any questions about this, always happy to answer an email. Make sure that you do have a look at the module content for this week if you haven't already. And if some of those terms are a bit unfamiliar, go back and complete the module and do the readings. I wish you a very happy weekend. I look forward to seeing you all next week on Tuesday. Okay. So next week we're going to be doing the data collection, very important, so please do come along to that so that you understand how the experiment works. Alright, see you all next time. Bye!